Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Or depending where you're from, perhaps good evening as well, because we have some people from Asia as well. So anyways, as people are coming in, I'll start with a short hello and welcome. So welcome to this webinar. Just to test in the chat, please do say hi and type where you're connecting from. It's always nice to see for us as well as, for the speakers to know where you're coming from. So do type in the chat where you're connecting from, also to test to see if our Q&A system is fine. So while the majority of registrants have, of course, come from Europe, we are happy to see interest from Africa and Asia as well. This webinar is organized with the support of the European Commission's Horizon Results Booster. I am Rob Carrillo from Trust IT Services and the HRB, and I will be your host for today. So with that, perhaps just some few housekeeping reminders. So remember that this webinar is recorded and that the slides will be published in the project websites. However, please do keep your questions until the end, just in case your question is being addressed in later slides. The Q&A will be held via the chat and through the raising of hands. So just for a quick introduction for this webinar. So this webinar is organized by the EU-funded projects EDI-SITNet and Clearinghouse. And these projects in this webinar aim to show how they methodically use trees and plants across European, Latin American, Asian, and Caribbean cities to show how cities of the future can be more sustainable. Across the world, societies are becoming increasingly urbanized, with populations moving into larger cities. This presents a number of challenges. So as cities become larger, living standards can suffer due to increasing demands. There are also logistical issues for the supply of fresh food, as cities generally far from agricultural food sources. Urban forest and farming solutions and the incorporation of green infrastructure are solutions that can make cities of the future more sustainable. These solutions should be explored not only within the halls of city government, but also by local neighborhoods, organized by their local community leaders and grassroots organizations. So today, our presenters are Dr. Ina Salmo from the HU Berlin and Kai Gilhorn, also from EDI-SITNet. And we have Clive Davis from the European Forest Institute and Clearinghouse. So they represent European-funded projects aiming to improve the sustainability of cities in different ways, such as implementing edible city solutions, to produce food in urban contexts, regenerating deprived social housing urban developments, and planting trees to improve urban living. And now with that, I now pass the floor to Clive Davis from Clearinghouse. Clive.
Thank you, and I hope my audio is clear. I will try to speak clearly for those that are not native English speakers. I'm actually attached to the European Forest Institute's office in Bonn in Germany, but live and have a position at Newcastle University in Northeast England. So today I will be introducing urban forestry in a broad sense, looking at the overall benefits, some trends, some case studies in incorporating trees in urban settings. Move to the second slide. So what is urban forestry? Let's start with some basics. Urban forestry definition as provided by Cecil Kininendijk and his colleagues in 2006. I won't go over it again, but I do want to draw attention to the two images. I wanted to ensure that there was a global perspective in this presentation today. Urban forestry is not something unique to Europe. It is global. The picture of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil and the picture of Jiaxing in China, I think, is illustrative of how the urban development and urban situation with trees exists across the globe. I thought it may be helpful today to also introduce the term peri-urban. One of the lead organizations involved with urban forestry over many years now is the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. And they have a preference in general, I would say, to refer to urban and peri-urban forestry. And it's certainly true that when we think of urban forests, the culmination of all the trees in the city and how they act together, they rarely end abruptly at the urban boundary. Their influence spills over into the surrounding areas, just, regardless of the size of the settlement. Also, I think very helpful from FAO they have recognized 5 types of urban forestry. But they describe these as peri-urban forests and woodlands, both in and surrounding city parks and urban forests greater in extent of 0.5 hectares, pocket parks and gardens with trees less than 0.5 hectares, trees on streets and in public squares, and then other green spaces with trees, for example, urban agriculture plots and sports grounds. The question is often asked, how do we place a value on urban forests? And I thought I would include today a graphic that comes from the London iTree project in the United Kingdom. The iTree project is probably the preeminent valuation tool for urban forests at the moment, originally developed in the United States, but now with global reach. This exercise demonstrated that London's trees provide at least 133 million sterling, which is around 150 million euros, of benefits every year in terms of air pollution, carbon sequestration, and reducing the amount of water going into drains. But they're only really the direct financial benefits. There are benefits also, particularly in terms of biodiversity, a theme that I will come back to in a little while. So the contribution that trees are making to major cities, or to be fair, cities of any size, can be now monetarily valued and is significant. Also, I thought it would be very much in keeping with the brief that I received today to talk about some of the trends that we see at the moment in urban forestry. And I've identified 5 of these. There may well be more. I think the first one is the role of trees in climate resilience. And I'm returning here to the United Kingdom for an example, but one could have looked to other countries. Certainly, trees seem to be of increasing political importance, and investments are being made. In the UK, for instance, some 12 million of UK pounds, about 14 million euros, has been made available to 10 community forest areas in England under a thing called the Trees for Climate Fund. And in the COP in Glasgow in November of last year, trees were one of the preeminent themes of discussion, particularly their role related to resilience. So my feeling is that the first trend of note is the increasing role that urban forestry will play in climate resilience, particularly, I think, in the lead up to the 2030 zero carbon targets. The second is the one that the Clearinghouse project is dealing with. This is urban forestry as a nature-based solution. Urban tree-based urban ecosystems can be used to address a whole raft of societal challenges, and they do so principally in the areas of ecosystem services for human well-being and biodiversity benefits. An example of the scale of this can be seen from efforts being made in China through their Forest Cities program, which is very ambitious. This particular picture is of the Beijing Forest Plains project. You can see the city's city limits in the distance, and this particular roadside planting, very impressive, I think, has been done to manage road noise, visual enhancement, and air filtration. Air quality, of course, is a major concern in many cities, and China is quite famous for its air pollution problems. The third area and the third trend is greater recognition of the role that urban forests play in contribution to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I return here to a graphic that appears in a FAO, the so-called guidelines on urban, peri-urban forestry, produced in 2016. The inset to the right, probably too small to see on screen, indicates that in the opinion of the authors, the urban forestry can play a role against many of these. And I've highlighted two in particular: zero hunger and good health and well-being. So in much the way that we have a theme today around food, urban forests are direct sources of food and are indeed very important in many societies, particularly those that are in developing countries and countries in transition. But equally important, not just in the developing world, but also in the developed world, is their role in good health and well-being, both in terms of settings of outdoor recreation and relaxation. But it has been shown that there is a considerable benefit that trees can provide in terms of people's mental well-being. Then we have the concept of biocities, something that I'm personally engaged with at the moment, linked very much to ecosystem services. The graphic here shows the types of ecosystem services an individual tree provides. Certainly, there is a compelling need for a new urban model to meet the current challenges as we go into this century where we are facing technological as well as human challenges, and indeed COVID-19 has added more to that debate. There is a belief in many quarters, and one that I subscribe to, is that the challenges that we meet in urbanization should be met more by biology than technology. We hear a lot about smart cities, which is to a large extent driven by technologies. But in future, I think we will hear more about biocities. And already there are a lot of people, including the European Forest Institute, exploring this concept. The fifth one that I wanted to reflect on was trees and urban forestry for better education. I've included a couple of quotes. The first one from the great Nelson Mandela: "Education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world." And a couple of inserts. One is a little toolkit for the Urban Forest School, which is available, and of course children's engagement with trees is a very positive expression of this. But there is citizen science too, and trees and urban forests are a great way to get people engaged in nature and in the exploration of wildlife, for example, in the city. This quotation from the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency says that citizen science provides a way for people to engage with science and their environment. I have included a couple of case studies. The first one shows the scale of initiatives. This is genuinely an urban and peri-urban initiative. The Donauauen National Park, 93 square kilometer green infrastructure corridor linking Vienna to Bratislava. So this is a transnational cross-border initiative. And we see here a whole series of woodlands being managed in many different ways, not least for recreation and education. I think this is a particularly good example of indicating the scale that projects can take place. But they can also be quite localized. The landscape park Deuceberg Nord in Western Germany is a very interesting case study, a former industrial site which has been reclaimed as a landscape park. And trees very much set the scene here, many of which have been created simply by encouraging natural regeneration. And you can see some of the legacy industrial structures within this particular picture. And the little bit of water is what's left of the River Ruhr that is undisturbed. Much of it, of course, has been industrialized. So I thought, given the theme for today, I would share with you some thoughts on edible forest solutions. The first is at the global level. Coming back again to one of my common sources for today, which is the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, they produced this very helpful little graphic showing the significance at a global level of urban forest types in terms of food and nutrition security. And you can see that the very high significance of peri-urban forests and woodlands in this regard, the trees that surround the city, but equally that any green spaces with trees can make a notable contribution and be of at least high significance. And the inset picture, I think, is some evidence of the harvest that can come from trees and be very useful in terms of nutrition and food security. Perhaps in Europe, there is a slightly different approach, although food and hunger are not by any stretch of the imagination unknown in Europe, far from it. But for many people, the edible forest solutions can be found by actually harvesting and enjoying nature's bounty. And many people in almost all countries collect things like berries and mushrooms and fungi and other things that can be found, not just to simply supplement their diet, but to actually enjoy what they eat. Coming to the end of my short presentation today, I want to share some thoughts on the non-human, because to many extents, when we think about edible forests, we tend to think about people. But actually many people, particularly within landscape research, are very interested in the concept of the urban area for the non-human. It's something that I'm fascinated by too as well. And in terms of thoughts here, we need to think about the fact that trees in urban areas actually provide an enormous resource. We know that biodiversity is in decline everywhere, and urban areas too. Densification is a policy that happens across all of Europe. Cities are growing up and green spaces are getting smaller. And the price to be paid for that is a reduction in biodiversity. But urban trees and the urban forest, considering that trees as a whole, provides an enormous food resource for the urban non-human. Birds, small mammals and vertebrates and more. So more trees, and more mature trees, and particularly more microhabitats, little nooks and crannies, we say in English with a Scots dialect, those little faults in the tree structure where, for instance, bacteria and fungus will grow. These are all key needs to sustain urban biodiversity. And you might expect me to say more trees, please, and this is very much the case. And it's not just the bit we see above the ground. The bit that is below the ground is equally important. The roots, the mycorrhiza, which is the way that trees can communicate with one another. Yes, they do talk to one another. And the soil microbiota are also very important in terms of edible food forest solutions. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Let me apologize again for the technology hit. But if you're interested in the Clearinghouse project, and you would expect me to give a little promo for it, here are some links. I would like to thank you for the invitation today. And I should be happy to try and answer any questions that go into the chat. And again, back to Rob, and apologies for the technical hitch.
So thank you very much for that wonderful introduction and of the importance of urban forestry and all the aspects. And in this case, we can go directly to Eddie Sidnet.
I have some few slides to show you a bit what is Edible Cities Network doing, our EdiCitNet project. This is the project of Clearinghouse. And you can see these are big projects, Clearinghouse as well, with a lot of partners all over the world. Our mission and our co-creation strategy I would like to highlight, because it's also related to what Kai later on will tell you. For us, Edible City solutions are a certain type, a special type of nature-based solutions, which overcome the mismatch between the traditional nature-based solutions and the citizens by deepening the social dimension of the cities and these solutions. What we aim is mainstream successful co-creation with practice from adaptive solutions that are socially inclusive, that invite citizens to co-create their environment, sustainable development of their environment, and to proactively change these environments to their benefits. And we aim so to make also a paradigm shift in the lifestyle, which we need to be more sustainable in the future. And we do this by co-creation within a community of knowledge, practice, and cosmologies. Here you can see a small picture on what we understand on adaptive solutions. It's not only about the different forms of urban farming and food production, it's also about distribution and consumption. What we think which is important is to have always closed loop systems in place and reuse water, nutrients, and waste as a resource. So to close really the loops and use the principles of green economy and circular economy. Urban food production is using innovative principles of ecological design and closed material and energy flows. And here one element you can see are the edible fruit trees and shrubs in streets and parks. And about this we will talk today. And there are some readings as well, maybe later in the slides, you can check this. And what I also would like to highlight is our communities of knowledge and practice. We have in different cities around the world open and participatory city teams with actors of all levels. So you can meet there the city administrator, planners, members of different local NGOs, and also of businesses, small and medium enterprises, and all they work together on a collective learning process that leads to a comprehensive and co-developed knowledge base with contributions from theoretical and practical context. And what we do in our co-creation process is testing adaptive solutions in living labs, how they work and what can be improved and optimized, and at the same time anchor adaptive solutions also in master plans for adaptive cities of the future. So these are my short insights, and then I would like to give the word to Kai.
That provides an excellent introduction for the next presentation, where we'll be hearing directly from Kai Deuceberg from Beijing. So, take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kai from Berlin. I'm part of the Biocities project. My background is environmental engineer, and I founded a foraging map 12 years ago. It's called Mundraub. And what you see here is a harvest camp close to Berlin. I'm also located in Berlin, like Ina, and we harvested 20 tons of apples there in the outskirts of Berlin. It's an urban orchard, and we made like 30,000 bottles of juice out of it. So that's why I just want to show you. I have some background and some knowledge about fruit trees. That's why I'm talking about fruit trees and urban fruit forests today. Just this is what Mundraub looks like. It's a map where everyone can add trees, and like people that are interested can find these trees and harvest them. They are mainly on public ground. Okay. Well, the fruit tree itself, a fruit tree is not an oak tree or a beech tree. A fruit tree consists of two different species. It's two living beings that are put together, and I show you on this sketch So the lower one is the rootstock, and it's got all the characteristics, the DNA of the trunk. So if you want a big tree, a strong tree, you take a big rootstock, and the upper part is contains the characteristics of the fruits. You know, you want big juicy fruits, you want sweet fruits, you want something tasty. And sometimes the rootstock doesn't produce like tasty fruits. That's why you combine two things together. And this is the something that is different from other trees. You should keep that in mind if you talk about fruit trees. If you have a look at this big apple tree, what do you think? Why is this branch? Why did it break? Has anyone an idea? If you have a look at the branch lying on the ground, you can see it's full of big apples, and it broke down because it was too heavy, right? That's why it's important to prune these trees when they are young, you know, to make sure that they build a very strong and stable, we call it crown in German. I think it's the tree crown, you know, it needs to be very stable. And if you don't look at these fruit trees, if you don't prune them, if you don't cut them, if you don't maintain them, after a while they will break apart, and they won't get old. So a fruit tree can become more than 100 years old. Like a pear tree can become 300 years old. But if you don't look at them, they die very early. And fungi and insects and everything go into the tree, and it will die. So a fruit tree, the value of a fruit tree, Clive was talking about the value of trees, like from a climate perspective, you know, or water retention, the water retention potential. But you calculate the price of fruits, like for instance, such an apple tree can bear 100 or 200 kilograms of fruits, and organic apples cost 3 to 4 euros per kilogram. So it can be 600 to 800 euros per tree and per year. And if you keep it alive for a very long time, it creates a big value, not only in like from a climate perspective or from a landscape or aesthetic perspective, but also from a real like food perspective. So so the title of this presentation is Fruit Trees in Social Housing Areas, and I want to show you a few examples that we have executed in the past. This is, for instance, so that shows you how you can use fruit trees to strengthen social cohesion, to make people happy, and to build a nice neighborhood. So this is a project, it's called Offspring. We offered fruit trees to young parents in urban areas that don't have a garden and don't have a place to plant. So we organized a place where they can bring the fruit tree for their offspring into the ground in Berlin. And we put the name of the child of the suckling on this tree. So it's directly connected to the tree. The child is connected to the tree and symbolizes the growth of the baby. This is a medlar tree in a residential area. So that's me last year when I pruned it. This is a workshop, EDCitNet workshop that we did last year. So we pruned apple trees in a schoolyard. This is an apple tree in a residential area as well, not well maintained. You can see it's very dense, so I had to open it up a bit to get light in it. This was a group of kindergarten kids. So they visited the yard where I was working last year and harvested the plums from the branches lying on the ground. So it's a bit of education. This is a quince tree in an old monastery garden from the place where I was born. Also quite, yeah, used from the people in the neighborhood. This is a plantation at the International Horticultural Exhibition in Berlin. In the background, you can see like concrete high-rises. It's a very highly populated area, and there are 100 young fruit trees close to this area. And this is a bad example. It's Ausgleichsmaßnahme. What is that in English? It's offsetting scheme in close to the airport of Schönefeld. They planted 200 young trees as an offsetting measure for this airport 10 years ago. But as you can see, it doesn't look like an apple tree. It looks like a wood willow, very sad. So the branches, yeah, hang down. They should like stand up, you know, like a young, strong man. But yeah, they are not looked after at all. So they kind of get old very early, and they don't like build strong branches. So, and you see that quite often in urban areas. The authorities plant fruit trees. They think that it's done with it, but they don't look after them, and they don't get old and big. And they could be used for education, for harvesting, and they could be a good backup for food supply in the future. And we should do something about it to like create really valuable places like fruit tree forests. So what do all these pictures have in common? They are all public or half public, and they are exposed to many people, and indeed they add value to the place where they are, and they could manifest beauty, freedom, and bliss in urban neighborhoods, but they are also sometimes endangered by vandalism, especially when they stand in very highly populated areas. And some are old, and they will vanish, they will disappear soon, or as you saw on the last picture, they are young and often not looked after. So if we want to create healthy fruit forests, we should have a look at it and make this better. Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to collect your ideas and mingle them to a tasty, inspiring framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kai, for that wonderful presentation. Now I suppose we could head into the Q&A portion. So, you know, you've all seen some very interesting insights from the projects. I now encourage you, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. It should be on your toolbar for Zoom. So do you have any questions there? Perhaps from the maybe we can start with the projects and with the speakers present. Do you have any questions for each other from the presentation and the insights that you've seen from each other? Clive, I think you're still muted.
Yes. I have a question. Yeah, I have a question for Kai. I'm very interested, Kai, in your work in Berlin. Is this part of a local initiative, and how is the work funded? Do you get financial support at all for the project that you're working on?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks, Clive, for the question. The Mundraub map itself, the foraging map itself, we got some funding in the past. Right now, we are not funded, but we're using the dirty Google AdWords, and we published 2 books which we are selling. So it's we're using actually the internet income streams for this foraging map. I'm and Jasmin, they are a bit funded by EDICITNet. But the pruning itself, like the work on the tree, they are funded by that, yeah, but by others, by third parties. So we're working with companies like, as you saw, like the offsetting stream was funded by a supermarket chain called Kaufland. We are working with the Cemex, it's a cemetery company. So we planted several orchards for them with their teams, so they pay us for that. And I'm also a fruit arborist, which it's not so. I'm not working for Mundraub then, but I'm working as a freelancer. So I get money from other sources. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all connected. It's connected, but it's not all in this company. Yeah.
If I may, unless there's a hand showing, just add a follow-up question, which is to do with the fact that you were referring to how much the fruit is of an organic apples per kilogram. Is there a ready market for the sale of these apples, or do you find it difficult to sell the apples?
I think there is an like emerging market right now. Like the picture I showed in the very beginning, this picture on this orchard with the many people. This was a project financed by an international horticultural exhibition. So they were interested in like apples from abandoned orchards, and they were interested in a product made from these fruits. So they paid us like to organize these harvest events and to produce a juice out of it. So to show, okay, this is something from forgotten fruits in our region. So this was kind of it was a product. It was a market approach. I'm not sure if. I think in some areas in Germany they are using urban fruits and make products out of it. But you know, I mentioned that an apple tree bears fruits like worth 600-700 euros. I think it's something we like a municipality should have in mind, that this is a value for their citizens or for their schools. You know, if they don't have to like people that are not very wealthy, so they could pick these fruits, and they don't have to pay for them. It's some it's not you know, it's they don't buy it, but they can use it, and they save money instead. So that's the value I have in mind. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you for that. I think we have a question from the audience. We have a question from Mohan Chandra. I am giving you the floor to speak. So Mohan, you can unmute and ask your question and introduce yourself. Actually.
Thank you. First of all, I am from India, so greetings from Hyderabad, India. So it was a nice presentation, both on the urban forestry, peripheral forestry, and this new concept of food forestry and that thing. I have only one basic question from Mr. Kai, because your project say that this is especially in the European country, where if you compare with the developing country like India, we have the urban forest area is little bit less in the cities and towns, comparison to European country where you have the good chunk of forest land available. I mean urban forest land, urban forest or urban greens. So my question is that, suppose if you have proposed that you are going to give that kind of urban forest land the food, I mean output from the apples, in example what you have provided, beautiful example of apples. I have one thing, how you are going to use that issue factor. What are the sharing mechanisms? Suppose let us say from one tree you got 100 kg of apple. So who is going to sell that thing, and who is going to get the revenue out of that? Is it the local municipality or the people?
Mohan, it was really hard to understand, because there was Yeah.
Those are static. But I think what Mohan was asking was who would benefit financially, if I'm not mistaken, Mohan, from the harvest of the fruits trees.
How you share the harvest?
Yes.
Income from the harvest. How you are sharing? Whether the municipality is sharing or the people are sharing. If the people are sharing, the how? What is the mechanism?
Okay. So a bit on the business model or
Yeah, if it's if these trees are standing on public ground, there's not really like a business model from business person to business person, because it's run and managed. It's managed by city authorities. Like when for instance, Berlin has 10,000 fruit trees on public ground. So we found out from the official tree inventory, which we imported to our foraging map. So it's 10,000 trees, and they are financed by the public. They are financed by tax money and also maintained with tax money. So there is no so there's no like public a private market. It's these trees are there, and as you saw, some are well maintained, well pruned, but some are actually abundant and fucked up. Sorry, but so you should so the city of Berlin, for instance, should be interested in healthy fruit trees for their citizens. It's not really a business model. We have, maybe it's different in Germany. We have a strong tradition in public fruit trees. It's like 300-400 years old. We used to have a law, like the king of Prussia, the king of Germany, said, okay, if you have a wedding, you should plant 3 fruit trees for the public, for the poor people. So, and it's still in the head. It's still in our like cultural DNA. So that's, you see many fruit trees along country roads, and they are public. It still comes from the past, and it was for poor people to, if you have some money, you plant fruit trees for poorer people, and it's not really a business. So who's benefiting? That was your question. The public is benefiting from it. So
the people can just harvest.
Yeah, pick it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Kai.
Thank you very much, Mohan.
Just to add that, in that case, Kai, you added that. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Just one point, since that at the time of wedding. Here also in India, also many of the communities at the time of their wedding, they prefer the planting of tree of their choice. So any ceremony when the wedding is going to happen, so what they will do, the bride and groom will go and plant a tree of a good fruit tree. At least that is a custom that, when you are starting your life, so you are going to add something to the society. At least from that tree, the rest of the people will take benefit. I am just citing an example in some of the communities in India. Thank you, Kai.
Okay, it's a pleasure, Mohan. Okay.
I think Dr. Eno wishes to say something.
Yes, I have an example from the 19th century. In the 19th century, in cities in Germany, at least, fruit trees were also rented to people to use them to make jam or juice or whatever. Yeah. And then the money which comes in was used to maintain the street. Yeah. So there are in the past interesting, let's say, business models that could be rechecked and reused maybe. And in the chat, I have seen from Hamburg a good example on how this could be used. Maybe the audience can also check this link.
Thanks for that. That's very interesting. Well, so we've seen some interesting ways on how to use fruit trees and so on. We have a question in the chat from Hussein who says, hi, I also live in Berlin, and in Germany, everything is over-regulated. I've been wanting to plant fruit trees and police have stopped me once. How can you navigate this?
Yeah, Hussein, I just read your question. I did the same. I did some guerrilla planting, so I planted a tree for my 2 children, and they took it out as well. I agree. It's overregulated, but they are also. I think there's a law when a tree becomes, old. You cannot just remove it. If it's still young, you can remove it. And I think the city authorities are afraid that that they have to look after a fruit tree which they don't want actually, and that they have to pay for it for their maintenance in the future. That could be one reason. And of course, Louisa Guédon, she replied to your request, and I have to say that's true what she says. The problem is that many municipalities are afraid that no one will take care. That's true. I saw many initiatives also in Berlin, in the Görlitz, in the park, Görlitzer Park where I live. They planted trees, but they didn't water them in summer, and they forgot about them after a while, because there's a high fluctuation, people move away, and no one really cares. And I think there has to be a commitment of the people or of the group that plants trees. Okay, we look after them, we water them in summer, we prune them until they are big and adult. And I think that's something we have to learn again. Yeah, we have to be, stick to it. We have to take responsibility. And yeah, rotten fruits on the streets and on car roofs is also a problem, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kai. So we have some additional questions in the Q&A part. One from Latifa Buselmi. So she thanks you for your presentations. She's asking what kind of educational workshop related to biodiversity can be organized for urban forests? And there's a follow-up question as well. In the case of urban forest, does the revenue from the product or the fruits, if so, go to the municipality or to the volunteers or NGOs? Perhaps for the first question regarding educational workshops, maybe Clive, you have something to share, considering you've highlighted how these urban forests can also be used for educational purposes.
I think for the most part, this is where the role of the voluntary sector probably comes in most. Interestingly, quite a lot of the people who work in the voluntary sector who have experience and skills often work in education, or maybe in a university, or possibly in a local authority in their paid time, but volunteer to do things with communities. And I really celebrate this. I think one of the things that is really positive about urban forestry, whether it'll be around food or biodiversity, which is another area that people are very passionate about, is that it's what in English we would call bottom-up approaches. It's not necessarily from the top down. And actually citizen engagement and the social benefits from people coming together to participate in a community orchard or in a local nature area, and why not combine the two, of course, it's something that is common in many countries. Of course, there is a difference, I think, between the developed and the developing world here. Poverty is unfortunately a major factor which can often prevent volunteerism, because people don't have the resources to volunteer because they're struggling with their everyday life. But for those of us who benefit from living in societies such as Germany and other developed societies, this bottom-up approach to voluntary activity is, I think, quite key. And where professionals such as Kai or others, and I mean there are, I think, hundreds if not thousands of Kais, not exactly clones of him, I'm not suggesting he's been genetically modified, is capturing that sort of skill in communities to work with local people, to provide training, to provide the initiative very often. Where a local authority can help is also to provide things like tools and small grants, not necessarily thousands of euros. Sometimes perhaps even 100 euros can make a difference to a group of volunteers. So there are some thoughts from myself.
Thanks for that. I'm just conscious of the time because we're in the last 6 minutes. I think the other question about, the product that's already been answered previously, some ideas even came up, potential business models for it. We have a question though from Jane Miller, who asks if either of the projects work with housing associations to encourage them to plant more fruit trees around their existing buildings, or with planting in residential areas. Any thoughts?
I think a question you were asking, if I've not misunderstood, is about planting around new social housing areas.
Exactly.
I certainly think there is a need for tree planting around these areas. One of the issues, I think, is about maintenance and management. This is a point also that Kai brought out about trees being planted and then not managed. If you are planting a tree with the intention that it's going to produce fruit, it has to be managed to avoid the problems like falling branches due to overweight, etc. I also think that one of the other things that can be uplifting in tree planting in social housing areas are trees that are very attractive, are aesthetically attractive. Regretfully, social housing areas, the quality of development is often very bland because they've been built down to a price. And the surrounding environment, trees especially, can introduce aesthetic beauty to an area and make it look a lot more attractive. And I think that we shouldn't underestimate the importance of that to communities and to people who perhaps have less. They can't afford to buy into the suburbs, and from that point of view, I think there are visual as well, or we might call them aesthetic benefits to be celebrated. But I think with fruit trees in particular, Kai's point about the need for them to be managed is you can't just simply plant and forget. I think that would be a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think there's just one, we can only accommodate one last question. And I think there's still just one that is not too much discussed yet, which is about potential funding programs for such initiatives. Maybe either you can provide just an overview of how to actually find these. If, within their own countries, where should people look for funding for these types of initiatives? Would like to go first? Perhaps Kai, do you have some ideas regarding where can we find funding for such initiatives for fruit trees within my own community if I were looking?
About funding, yeah, I answered Moritz already in the chat. It differs from Bundesland. We're talking about Germany now. So for people not from Germany, we have different Länder like
federal states.
Sorry?
Federal states.
Federal states, yeah, we have different federal states, and they have different funding programs. There's a great funding program in Thüringen, and because they pay for revitalization of old orchards. That's a very great. So they pay everything, if you make plant even old trees that are 100 years old. If you maintain them, or if you cut them, you get paid for it. Bavaria, for instance, pays for 1 million. It's very new. They want to plant and maintain 1 million fruit trees in the next 10 years. It's a huge program. Then, of course, these offsetting programs that I mentioned, you know, when you build a road or an airport or whatever, or an industrial estate, you have to offset it, and you can plant fruit trees then. So there are different opportunities how to finance such an urban fruit forest. So it differs from Bundesland, from federal state to federal state. But if you're interested, I know there is a brochure somewhere which lists all the different programs all over Germany. So if someone is interested, you just write me an email to kai@muntrop.org and I'll find out for you.
Okay, thanks. Ina, from your side?
I need something to add to this, what Kai told us. One important actor in this are the housing companies, which own a lot of area in at least in Central European cities. In Germany, it's like this. And there you can really contact people that are open to plant also edible trees. And this is related to the presentation of Kai, you also take a bit care of this tree. But mostly, these housing companies are really open to also produce a bit of, put a bit of money there, and then you and your neighbors, you can really earn and harvest and celebrate together. And this edible landscaping is highlighted currently or showcased in our living lab in the Edisitnet project in Berlin-Hellersdorf as a good example.
Thank you for that. So very interesting. Two possible sources. So one, you reach out to your local government and so more public route, and then the other is banding together as a community, a housing association, and then reaching out to the housing company. So very interesting. And now we've come, unfortunately, to the end of our webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating, especially to our speakers who have given us a lot to think about and lots of insights that came out of the presentations today. Most of all, of course, thank you to our participants, our audience, very active. Thank you for the very interesting questions that you posed to us. The presentation and the recording will be shared in the project websites. Perhaps within a week we'll be able to finish, or actually in a few days we'll be able to finish the recording editing, and we'll share it with the projects for them to post. So please do visit the websites of Clearinghouse and Edisitnet for more information. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice day. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a nice weekend altogether.
Yes, bye-bye, everybody.